Well, SLS was summer literature seminars. At some point, when I started going to Russia in '93 first, and then in '90, I think second time, and then '94, and then '96. By that time in '96, I started thinking of how do I keep going back, but without paying the airfare. And but generally, but the impulse, of course, was not quite so lighthearted. The impulse was that by that time I'd already started teaching in summer literary programs in addition to permanent job. The summer literary programs like in Minnesota, Split Rock, for instance. Just there are lots and lots of those summer programs in the United States. Almost Breadloaf, almost all of them are in like picturesque locations, just to isolate people either on the ocean shore or in the forests or in the mountaintop, just to isolate people from the routine of their lives and from. But I started thinking that we could bring a program to St. Petersburg, because why not? And when I saw that the program started being created like that in Prague, and I saw an ad in Poets and Writers magazine, immediately I had that idea. And so I went back in '96 and I started thinking about it. Leningrad, St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg, probably the most artificial and literary city in the world because it's just as much a creation of Peter the Great's imagination. It's a phantom of his imagination, essentially, just as much as it's a real city. So its purpose was essentially kind of literary, and there are very few cities in the world that would have so much literature dedicated to it or set in it. Just London and Paris, probably. That's probably it. And so yeah, I went back to Union College, where I was teaching at the time in upstate New York, and there was already internet by that time, and first kind of emails, but I wasn't. There was certainly no mass mail that I. And I kind of prefer. I put together like a very amateurish kind of flyer and started enclosing it in envelopes, and I took a list of all the creative writing programs in the United States. And I sent a single letter with that flyer to all of those creative writing programs. And I made lots of copies, of course, just this old Xerox machine in the English department. I had to do it late in the evening because otherwise, and so, yeah, I still remember doing that. And then I just started sending out. And then I asked when I was in Russia, I'd spoken with one of the people deans for international work, and at St. Petersburg, and asking whether they could offer us space at their hotel, which is in the very heart of the city. That was my only interest in that university, but it was the heart of the city, and at that point it was very cheap, still. And yeah, and although in Russia there is always kind of all kinds of negotiations and bribes involved. So yeah, managed to secure that space and asked two of my friends, writers. I remember Philip Lopate being one of them, and I don't remember who was the second one, to be as faculty. And then I just basically sent out all those letters, and I got some responses. 10 people said, "Well, sure, we'll come."
So just a small little group the first
Tiny
time.
little group.
Yeah.
But then but the following year, there were already 20 people.
Hmm.
And then there was a group of people already who started helping me on permanent basis, and they were like in charge of the logistics and doing all kinds of stuff. And it became a whole different matter. It suddenly became big. It's by 99, by 2000, it was already a big program. By 2001, it was well over 100 people. 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, when was a all told, we probably brought in excess of 1,000, mainly American writers of all ages and levels of accomplishment to St. Petersburg, um, and um, and 100 maybe, writers in residence, well-known writers, American, international, Russian literary critics, and so forth. It was a lot of fun. But by 2004, it already started changing several things. After St. Petersburg celebrated its 300th anniversary, um, several things started changing. First off, Putin started revealing himself to be what everybody had expected him to be, which is to say, profoundly, quote unquote, Soviet KGB kind of guy. He jailed the head of the largest oil company in Russia and largest political figure named Mikhail Khodorkovsky, put him in jail and took away his oil company, and that was um, uh, and that was the kind of watershed moment. I knew right then and there that would, but also at that point, oil prices went through the roof for no accountable reason, and everything became, in Russia, of course, everything started becoming very expensive very quickly. So it started becoming progressively more difficult to hold the program. But by 2006, somewhere, I think I already knew that we would have to celebrate our 10th anniversary there and then call it uh, a day, because political atmosphere was changing very rapidly. So the former KGB people, or as they were known, FSB, started circling around the program, asking me questions, not the logistics director, not other, but me, because I was, former Soviet person.
Things did they ask you? What did they ask
They
you?
asked, how do you know, how can you be certain? You have 100 people here. How can you be certain, for instance, that at least one or two of those people don't work for the CIA? And I would just say, how do you know that I don't work for the CIA? And say, well, you would never. You're one of us. I said, no, that's a very, very profound mistake, actually.
That's what you said to them. Wow.
Well, because I am a U.S. citizen, it was kind of jocular kind of conversation,
Yeah.
just what would they do to me? The worst they could do to me was just kick me out, But they didn't have the authority or the desire to kick me out, but they wanted to show me that we are back.
Mm.
And it started being, we went through different periods in that program. There was period where cops in the streets were much more dangerous than thieves, because cops were the main people who stole money or shook people down, just especially foreigners who didn't understand what's going on. They would just stop you and just start looking across your passport and just, and then just tell, like, okay, you violated something. We have to go to the police precinct, or we can give you, like, a fee to pay, to have it go away, So,
your literary guests started being fleeced by the police.
Fleeced by the police, but we, of course, had to counter that. We had our own people who we had very strict, instruction to our participants and so forth. Everybody knew, and we fortunately had precious few accidents. And but it was always there. It was always there, especially since people finding themselves in St. Petersburg in the middle of the night in this very heart of an exceptionally vibrant place. They would party till 6 in the morning, some bar, and they would just by 6 in the morning they would be done, and then they would go to classes, and they would be dancing all night at that bar and drinking. So yeah, and there would be cops waiting for them. So it was, it was a lot of fun, but it was stressful. By some point, I realized that I can no longer fully justify in my mind bringing large groups of Americans to a place that no longer was kind of future bound in my mind. It was started regressing very quickly, and also on top of that, of course, it became very expensive. So we stopped there. But along the way, while we were still doing program in St. Petersburg, we started doing program in Kenya, because I had strong connections to that place, to Kenya, having spent several years taking Union College students on a program abroad there in Kenya, and gotten to know many interesting people and writers there. So, and developed very strong attachment to that place. So yeah, that's so how the SLS is a typical example. Right now, it's on hiatus, but we're thinking of reactivating it. Um, but it's a characteristic example of something that you think is going to be in the margins of your life, just some one-time deal, just some kind of interesting kind of undertaking, and then it basically moves very firmly into right in the middle of the basic text of your life, as Novak would say.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a very interesting phenomenon, because I had no intention when I started that program that it would go on for 10, 15, 17 years. No, I just thought, well, it was wonderful that I went once, twice, and now look, it's grown. But whoa, now it's like 140 people.
Mm.
You know. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.